Curious George discovers recycling. George was a good little monkey and always very curious. He was especially curious about protecting our environment and keeping the planet clean. Do you want to learn all about recycling with George? George had been getting ready to throw away a big bag of trash. As he was about to lift the heavy load into the garbage chute, he heard the doorman shout, "Wait, are you sure that trash is all trash?" George didn't know what the doorman could be talking about. The bag was filled with things that George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, no longer needed and were ready to throw away. "We need to separate recyclables from trash," the doorman told George. Taking the bag, he grabbed a few of the items and tossed them in some big blue bins labeled with arrows. "Recycling makes our planet a lot neater, George. And on top of that," he said, handing him a flyer, "there's a contest for the city's apartment buildings. The building that collects the most recycling wins." That all sounded great to George, except he didn't know what recycling was. George wanted to help recycle. Once he figured out how to do it, George showed the flyer to the man. "Recycling makes old bottles and cans into new bottles and cans. Otherwise, trash would just pile up all over the planet," said the man with the yellow hat. This made George very worried. He didn't like thinking about Earth covered in trash. The man with the yellow hat could tell George was concerned. He had an idea. "Say, George, would you like to visit the recycling center? Then you can see how this whole thing works." Just a few minutes ago, George didn't even know what recycling was. Now he was going to see it in action. On their way out, they saw the doorman bringing recyclables to the outside bins for the contest. "We're off to an impressive start," the doorman said. George and his friend arrived at the recycling center. George saw 4 big pitchers hanging above 4 big containers. There were a cardboard box, a glass bottle, a tin can, and a plastic jug. Being a curious monkey, George jumped right into the bin full of glass bottles and jars. Just then, a man who worked at the recycling center came over. "My monkey would like to see what recycling is all about," said the man with the yellow hat. The worker took a glass jar from George's hands, turned it over, and poured it to the bottom. There was something George had never noticed before. 3 arrows shaped like a triangle. When you see 3 arrows like this, it means the item can be recycled, the worker said. "Come with me." Once the item gets to the recycling center, the next step is for it to be sorted properly and then clean, the worker explained. George saw lots of jars and bottles and containers cruising down a conveyor belt. They were going to end up in those big bins he'd seen. The worker then showed George a poster. It explains the recycling process. Recycled glass is broken into small bins and then melted down plastic, too, he said. Even recycled paper could be broken down to make new paper. George could hardly believe that was all possible. There was so much to recycle. Back at the apartment, the competition was heating up and the doorman was worried. They were falling behind. Thanks to her visit to the recycling center, George had some good ideas about how to help recycle. He went upstairs to get started. In the refrigerator, George saw lots of containers he could turn on for the recycling contest, but none of them were empty. The olive jar only had a few olives left in it, and the ketchup container was only half full. What if George just combined them? When George finished going through the refrigerator, he moved on to the rest of the apartment building. He saw big plastic paint buckets with the arrows on the bottom. He took them. He saw a grocery delivery just sitting outside an apartment door. He took the shampoo and juice bottles, a stack of pizza coupons. That paper could be recycled. He took the whole pile. All these things would help fill his building's recycling bins. George was so happy to be helping recycling. While George was collecting these items, the doorman was talking to the doorwoman next door. Her building was competing in the recycling contest as well. The more people recycle, the better is it for the earth, she said. And if your building participates in some reuse programs, you'll help the planet even more. The doorman didn't know the difference between reusing and recycling. The doorwoman explained that reusing simply means using something again. In her building, people leave their magazines in a common area for other people to read. Instead of throwing away moving boxes, they kept them in the basement for other people to use when they needed them. Hey, I reused my shopping bags, said the doorman. He was already doing it. When the doorman returned to his recycling bins, they were all filled to the top. The doorman was impressed, but the doorman wasn't sure where all this stuff had come from till someone took my paint pails. My grocery was stolen. Where are our piece of coupons? All their items were in the recycling bins. The doorman was confused, but just then George came outside carrying another stack of newspapers. The man with the yellow hat was right behind him. I think I know where the extra recycling came from, the man said, holding his olive jar, which was full of ketchup. George, you recycle things after you use them? Oops, George had forgotten that part. After George and the doorman returned all of the extra items, it turned out to be a tie with the woman's building. The two buildings could share the trophy. George eyed the three big arrows on the front of the trophy. That's not recycling, George, they all laughed. George would get the hang of recycling soon enough. The end.